Hello and welcome to episode part 22 of our podcast series titled Unraveling the Revelation, a detailed look at the influences on the Church of God's interpretation of the book of Revelation. I'm Dale Rood. I want to open with some administrative comments, as usual. And I would invite you to participate in this podcast by emailing me any questions, comments, or criticisms to respondingtoreligiousramblings@gmail.com. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel and you will receive notifications when new material is available. Also, if you like what you're seeing or you don't like what you're seeing and you want others to maybe look at it, you can do that. You can share that with a friend by sending that link to them, or they can just get on YouTube and they can type in responding to religious ramblings with underscores between each word. I'll start this out by telling you a funny little story. My family and another family that I love and appreciate very much, when our children were young, we would go on walks there at the reservoir in Springfield, Ohio, and they had a loop you could make, and it was, a couple miles or so, and we would take the kids out there, and we'd all go for walks, and oftentimes the kids would run ahead of us and, play around and so forth, and so we were at the top of that the hill there that you see behind the children. There's a walkway up there, and so we were walking, the adults, and the kids ran ahead, and of course, that's a very popular walking site, so people walk back and forth. And anyways, the kids ran ahead, and they ran into some people, and the people asked them a question. And the boys was like, no, we're not. And they came running back to us. They said, Dad, they asked us if we were alcoholics. And of course, I started laughing because what they really said was they had asked the children if we were apostolics. And so the kids had never heard that word before. And so they were highly offended that someone would ask them if they were alcoholics. So I share that because there is a tie-in to our lesson today. Let's go back and talk about Brother William Seymour. And you can go back to the podcast that episode that I spent quite a bit of time talking about him. Brother Seymour was a ordained minister of the Church of God Evening Light, and he went on to be involved in the Azusa Street, not be involved, but actually headed up the Azusa Street revival, so to speak. And I also did not mention at that time a recommended reading, and I'm going to put that out here now. It's called Azusa Street, an eyewitness account of the birth of the Pentecostal revival. And it's written by Frank Bartleman. He was actually there and saw things firsthand, and he tells that story in his book. It's a very interesting read. Now, as I said, Brother Seymour there was ordained with the Church of God Evening Light, and he went on to be a founder of what was called the Apostolic Faith Church of God. Well, guess where you got that name, Church of God? You don't have to probably guess too hard. But the apostolic faith, in other words, the faith that was found in the original apostles. That's what he was. That's what he had in mind. Okay, and so anyhow, he then, as time went on, another church that was formed from that same. Not that same time period, but from the same outreach of that particular time, and that was called the Apostolic Church. You probably heard about it. Typically, we in the Church of God will refer to them as Jesus only. They do not believe in the teaching of the Trinity. And so they're very conservative in their dress. If you saw them, or you were in a big congregation of them, you would think that they were... you might think that they look very much like the way that the conservative element of the Church of God dresses. The big difference being that they speak in tongues and also that they are dispensationalists, so they don't embrace the church historic interpretation of Revelation. Well, one of those men that came from that movement was a man by the name of William Branham. He was born in 1906 in Kentucky, and he was converted at the age of 22. He died in December of 1965 in Texas, and he was buried in 1966. Yes, you read that right. He was buried in April 24th, 1966, Easter Day. Now, I'm going to talk about that later on, but just take note of it. In June of 1933, William Branham held his first gospel tent campaign in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and I believe that's actually where he ended up growing up. And I'm just going to share with you a brief history. I'm not going to get into the details of his life because this is outside of the connection to the Church of God. This man had no affiliation to the Church of God. I'm just sharing this for a reason. So anyways, following that tent campaign, the next Sunday, he was out baptizing 130 of the new converts as a result of that meeting, and they were being baptized in the Ohio River, and a vivid, pulsating ball of amber-colored fire appeared in the heavens before a crowd of some 3,000 people that had gathered on the riverbank, descending over the 24-year-old pastor with the sound of rushing wind. Some worshipped, others ran in fear. A voice spoke from this pillar of fire and said, quote, "As John the Baptist was sent to forerun the first coming of Jesus Christ, your message will forerun his second coming." And from that point on, Brother Branham's ministry was very signs and wonders oriented and involved much extra biblical revelation, such as personal prophecies that he had, experiences, and directives, quote unquote, straight from God. And so you'll see a little bit of that as we go on. So here in July the 24th, 1950, William Branham was giving a public debate over the doctrine of divine healing. He was obviously a very strong advocate of divine healing. And while he was giving this debate, a supernatural halo, and he referred to it as a pillar of fire, appeared above his head at the Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas. And this is a picture of that. Now, forensic experts have looked at that and said it doesn't appear to be manipulated. It doesn't appear that, they didn't have Photoshop back in those days. Today, you can make anything look like, you can make anything. People, I do it all the time. I put, sometimes if I have a family reunion and somebody's missing, I'll go back and take a picture of them by themselves and I Photoshop them in. It looks like we're all there in the same place. It's easy to do now. And it's easy to edit pictures. But back in those days, it was not. And so forensic experts have looked at this picture and it looks legit. So was it supernatural or was it demonic? That's something that every person will have to decide for themselves. Okay, now we're going to start to get into the tie-in and why I'm presenting this particular man and bringing it up in this podcast. So the Church of God, we're not the first people to use Revelation and divide it up into 7 segments and even take those church letters and make them represent 7 time periods. We're not the first one to do this. And also, we're not the first group of people that came up with that idea. You can date that clear back to Darby and others after him. So it wasn't original to the Church of God. it was customized, so to speak, to the Church of God. And we've been through all that. I'm not going to go through all that again. But Brother Branham here was he was one of the brethren that took that very seriously, and he embraced that idea. By the way, I just want to mention, since I'm on that subject, one of the best books, and I probably should have put a recommended reading on here. One of the best books I've ever read on the 7 church letters was written by David Jeremiah. And he's a Baptist, and in fact, he was at one time the president of Cedarville Bible College, or Cedarville University, which isn't far from where I live. But he wrote a book, and he talked about those 7 church letters, and it was one of the best books I've ever come across, as far as talking about the events and the events in the Old Testament, or not the Old Testament, the events in history. And those 7 cities, and kind of what they were like, and what those symbols might represent. Now, obviously, he holds a dispensationalist view, so he does not hold the church historic view. But if you're just interested in reading about the historical facts of those church letters, that's a book I recommend. I can't remember the name of it, but if you just type in church letters or churches of Asia and Dr. David Jeremiah, you should be able to find that book. Okay, so let's get back to our slide here. In 1960, Branham preached a series of sermons on the 7 church ages based on Revelations chapter 2 and 3. The sermons closely aligned with the teachings of C.I. Scofield and Clarence Larkin and the Church of God 7 seal teaching. Branham and said each church letter in Revelation 2 and 3 represents a historical church age, and taught that the angel of each age was a significant church figure. Branham believed the Laodicean church age would immediately precede the rapture. Branham described the characteristics of the Laodicean messenger, or that angel we would probably say, by comparing his traits to Elijah and John the Baptist. Okay, so he basically described that angel, if you will, of that church age to the traits of Elijah and John the Baptist. His belief in a 7th church age messenger came from his interpretation of the book of Revelation 3:14 through 22. Now, I am going to talk about that later on, but let me just kind of wrap that up. Basically, what he taught was that each church age, within each church age, there was a messenger. And that messenger is the one that had the message of the hour, or the message of the age, so to speak. And so, Brother Branham, he described and selected someone for each church age, and said they represent what that church age was about, because they had the message of the hour. Okay, we've done that a little bit. We don't really identify the messenger of the New Testament. I mean, some might say, well, it could have been Paul, since he wrote most of the New Testament. But we don't have a messenger in the 2nd church age, 3rd church age, 4th church age. When it comes to the 5th, we talk about Martin Luther and God using him. When it comes to the 6th, we talk about the Wesley brothers, and more specifically, John Wesley and the message of holiness. When we talk about the 6th church age, we talk about Brother Warner. When we talk about the 7th church age, we typically, more so back in the day, would talk about Brother Goodnight having the message. And then more recently, people would probably look to Brother Emerson Wilson and say he's the one that had the message of the hour. And I think I read a quote that said that. And so in some of the writings of the 7th seal, you can even find where they'll say God reached down in this time age and he found a man, and then they'll say who it was. I've noticed that, especially in some of the newer writings. They'll say God reached down during this church age and he found a man, and he used that man. And certainly, I'm not disputing the fact that God uses men. But we never really specifically said this was the messenger. Okay? All right. So here's another event. Supernatural cloud. 26 miles high and 30 miles wide. Let me just read it. This supernatural cloud was prophesied by William Branham in December of 1962. So he prophesied that there would be an event like this. It was eventually formed on the evening of the 28th of February, 1963, by 7 angels. Now you look at that and, I kind of like see it. I see maybe an angel at the top there. I don't know if you can see my mouse. I kind of see an angel there. But anyways, we weren't there, so who knows what that thing looked like, as it evolved. But the point being that he made this prophecy, and on 28th of February 1963, by 7 angels to herald the opening of the mysteries of the 7 seals of the book of Revelation. The angels supposedly met with Branham a week later at the location where this cloud took place, 40 miles northeast of Tucson, Arizona, on March the 7th, 1963. And these angels told him to go back to Jeffersonville, Indiana, where he grew up, where the mystery of the 7 seals would be revealed to him. Branham preached a sermon in 1963, further indicating that he was the prophet who had the anointing of Elijah and was a messenger heralding the second coming of Christ. Branham did not directly claim to be the end-time messenger, but it was believed that he desired to be the end-time prophet. Branham apparently left the identity of the messenger open to the interpretation of his followers, who widely accepted that he was that messenger. Okay, so he never came out and said, I am the 7 seal messenger, but he kind of indicated that he might be, he'd like to be, and they accepted him as being the messenger, and they really did accept him as being the messenger. You're going to see that here in a few minutes. Okay, there's a picture of Brother Branham there on the right-hand side, and this was found in one of his books titled The 7 Church Ages, a literal transcription of a series of sermons by William Marion Branham. And it says at the bottom, Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great dreadful day of the Lord. By the way, I'm going to make something clear here. Oftentimes when I'm going through these slides, I might refer to individuals by their name, or I might refer to them as brother or sister so-and-so. If I don't say their name, it's not because I think that they weren't saved. I'm not that kind of a person. I don't go around judging people's salvation. I am very used to calling people brother and sister. You know that song? You will notice we say brother and sister around here, written by the Gaithers, who, by the way, we're Church of God as well. It's because we're part of a family and these folks are so dear. So we call each other brother and sister. I grew up with people, here I go on a tangent here, but I grew up with people, I never even knew their first name. Worshiped with them for 40 some years. Never knew their first name because we just called them brother, sister, Smith or Sister Jones. Didn't even know, I remember one time someone said, they found out where I worshiped, and they said, and I'll make up a name here. They said, Anita. Anita? Yeah, she's been out there for years. I said, I can't think of who that is. I don't know who that is. And then they said, oh, that's Anita, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, Sister Smith. Okay, yes, I know her well. So my point I'm making is, I call this man Brother Branham. I don't know if he was saved or not. I give people the benefit of the doubt. I obviously don't condone his teachings or anything like that. I don't condone some of the things that he taught or he believed in. But I'm not the judge of people's salvations. And so I Brother Emerson, I'm going to quote him. He used to say, I call him brother. He said, if I don't catch him in Christ, I catch him in Adam. And I thought, well, that's pretty good. I like that. So I typically call everybody who has a profession of faith brother and sister. I know, trust me, I know there's a lot of people in the Church of God, especially Seven Seal, that will not call someone else brother because they feel that they're condoning them or they're putting their stamp of approval on them. Okay, well, I'm not one of those people, so I'll just leave that there. On the left-hand side of this particular slide, you see the 7 church ages there, and we've talked about them. Now, you'll notice he's got dates assigned to them, just like we do. Not the same dates, though. Different dates, because he saw them in a different way. The time periods, he laid the time periods out much differently than what we have. But he identifies that messenger for each one of these ages. So he identifies Paul as the Ephesus messenger, the Smyrna messenger. He identifies Irenaeus. He was one of the early church fathers, so to speak, there, using terms that's found in religious circles. And then for the Pergam church age, he used a man by the name of Saint Martin. And the next one, Thyatira, St. Columba. I had actually never heard of that man. I had to do some research on him. He comes from, I believe, over in Ireland. And anyways, he did some pretty significant things. And then, as the Church of God does, he identifies Martin Luther and Wesley as those 5th and 6th. Now, he put them in the 5th and 6th time period. We put them in the 4th and 5th. But the same 2 individuals. And then when it comes to Laodicea, in his book here, he doesn't put anybody there. But obviously, his followers identified him as that messenger in a big way. And we'll get to that. Okay, so he loved charts. And by the way, I want to thank a brother who sent me a book since I've been doing this podcast. And it was Larkin's book. Let me see here if I can turn the camera on. This book right here. So thank you for sending that. It had some very interesting charts. And I'm finding them very useful. I love digging into stuff like that. So Branham had his own chart, and you can see a lot of words and stuff. He describes all the dates that he has on his, details of it, who his the messengers were, and all that kind of thing. So I just wanted to put that out there to show that the overall structure that he was using is the same structure that we use in the Seventh Seal Church of God. Just different names, different dates, and also some different events. Okay, another similarity to Church of God is Brother Branham was very anti-denominational, and he took a very strong stand in that direction. Let me just read some quotes, and you can find these at the link there at the bottom. And by the way, if you are interested in reading anything about Brother Branham, please, there is a ton of information there about him. His followers to this day are very devoted to his teachings. While he died many years ago, 50-some years ago, his followers are very adamant about his teaching. In fact, they're so adamant that they're almost hard to reason with. Let me read you some information that came out of that particular book there, writings. Branham believed denominationalism was, quote-unquote, a mark of the beast. Branham was not opposed to organizational structures. His concern focused on the roadblock to salvation and Christian unity. Sound familiar? He believed that denominations created this roadblock by emphasizing loyalty to their organizations. That I could put that. You could find a quote like that in most Church of God writings. Branham's doctrine was similar to the anti-Catholic rhetoric of classical Pentecostalism, Protestantism, Adventism, and Church of God, which commonly associated the mark of the beast with Catholicism. I believe we do the same thing for the most part. Branham, though, uniquely associated the image of the beast with Protestant denominations. We do as well. In his early years, he came to believe all denominations were synagogues of Satan, and I've seen that expression used in the early writings as well. A key teaching of Branham's message was a command to true Christians to come out of the denominations and accept the message of the Laodicean messenger, who had the message of the hour. He argued that continued allegiance to a denomination was an acceptance of the mark of the beast, which would mean missing the rapture. So you can go there and you can read about what I just said. Some of these are not direct quotes from him. I paraphrased what is included in this article, but this is what he taught. And it's very, very similar to what Church of God has taught from the very beginning. Okay, here's another example of where there are some similarities. I'm going to read you a quote down here regarding the 7 parables of Matthew 13. So Matthew 13 shows the 7 church ages in parable form, while Revelations 2 and 3 show the church ages in far more detail through visions. Denominationalism has often tried to use these parables to teach it is the Lord's way of showing how sinners are to be saved. This is far from true. It is the Lord's way of informing us how the church, which he bought and paid for at Calvary, would be so affected by the spirit of Satan. Christ is showing how the church would begin to lose ground almost immediately upon entering her earthly journey and would finally go through 7 major changes before being brought completely back to the true word position as she was in the original beginning of her journey. And that's taken from the writings of one of his followers by the name of Raymond Jackson, and you can see the link there below. Actually, you can go there and download that a tremendous amount of information about William Branham and his teachings. But this kind of talk, it's exactly what we've been saying. Same thing. Now this is funny to me. I mean, I find it funny, but maybe his followers probably would not laugh. So when he would preach, they looked as though everything he said was anointed, was a message from God. And so they literally went back and transcribed all of his messages, including the ums. So like me, occasionally I'll say they even include that in his writings. Here's an example of it right here. You can see it a couple times in this particular line. They did put his ums in there. So even his ums were anointed. And you can go ahead and read. You can download this document, and you'll see that all throughout it. All right. So here is the comparison. This is in one of his books, a comparison of the 7 churches of Revelation and the 7 parables in the Gospel of Matthew. And you can go down the list there. And I just showed you, actually, Brother Emerson taught this very similar thing here. I just find that interesting. I don't know of anybody else that had done that. So it would be interesting to see, and I don't have time to do this, but it'd be interesting to see if somehow Brother Brandon may have gotten some literature from Brother Emerson or vice versa. I don't know. Or I'm not discounting the fact that God could have revealed this to both of them. So I don't mean to imply that there was some kind of, plagiarism going on there. But I have never seen anybody do this outside of Church of God teaching. Okay. Now, Branham was worshipped by his followers. He died on December 24th, 1965, as a result of a car accident. He was out in Texas, and I believe his wife was killed, and he had other people in the car that were were seriously hurt. But they did not bury him until Easter Day of the following year, April 11th. Some of his followers believed he would be resurrected from the dead, and therefore his body was preserved for 3 months. Now, in today's environment, there's a lot of people that's being cremated, and they'll keep their ashes, and then later on have a memorial service and have their ashes buried. It's pretty common now. But it's not common to keep someone's body on ice, so to speak, because you believe that God's going to raise them from the dead. But that's what they believed. In fact, I remember reading about this, and eventually the state of Indiana had to step in and said, this man needs to be buried. And so they did. They buried him on Easter Day. Now, many of his followers still visit his gravesite before dawn on Easter Sunday every year, expecting him to be resurrected. That's how dedicated these people are. They're dedicated to that man and his teachings. So this is here. I'm going to read this here. This was taken from an article titled "The Man, His Commission, and Prophetic Vindication." His character, born out of great adversity and trial, was humble and unassuming, yet so full of compassion and the power and demonstration of the Holy Ghost to handle every situation. That's how they felt about him. Some that loved him dearly began to believe that he was Jesus Christ, just as centuries before there had been those who confused John the Baptist with the Messiah. So, yeah, you're always going to have, in every group, there's going to be some fanatics or radicals. I'm certain that all of his followers don't feel this way. They recognize him as being the messenger, but there's some that question maybe he was the Messiah. Crazy, 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 but not as crazy as you might think. I'm going to talk about a Church of God group here. I think our next episode, and they have their own form of Messiah too. All right. Here you go. They believe this so much. This is William Brannon's gravestone. I hope you can see that. So his grave marker lists the 7 churches of Revelation on one side. You can see that down in the bottom lower left. And a list of 7 men who Brannon believed significantly impacted the church. They are, and I quoted these before, Paul, Irenaeus, Martin, Columba, Luther, Wesley, and at the top of the list, the Laodicean angel was William Brannon. And there it is, inscribed on his stone. So I'll try to read what that book there says. It says, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. But in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he declared to his servants, the prophets." Now, okay. I'm just going to leave that there. I'm not even going to say anything else about that. All right, that concludes this episode. once again, if you have any comments, suggestions, criticisms, please send those to me. I'll send you my phone number. I don't put my phone number out on social media because I already get so many spam calls as it is now. I'm not going to put my number out there and then somebody get it and put it in some kind of database and I get more spam calls. But I'll be happy to give it to you, anyone who contacts me. I understand the nature of some Church of God groups where you're not supposed to talk to other people. You're not supposed to, have any fellowship. You're not supposed to, you're supposed to, if you see them on the street, walk on the other side. I've heard all them stories. I know how they exist. If you want to keep our discussion between you and I, we'll keep it between you and I. No problem. Just let me know. And I'm just putting that out there because that's just how it is. Some of these groups are almost cultish. And that's really sad. So anyways, there you go. We'll see you next podcast. Be sure to tune in on our next podcast. I'm going to be covering the Church of God Restoration, which is a movement that began out of the Guthrie Church of God, the people that left in 1910, 1913. And we're going to be talking about them. And if you think that, well, I'll just leave it alone. Come back and you'll find out. Lord bless.